Should I put your passport in the black travel organizer or the suitcase? Emma placed two dark blue U.S. passports on the entryway console, nudging them slightly with her fingertips so they aligned perfectly. David's official passport was only here because a week ago he had fought tooth and nail to get temporary permission from his special security officer to take it out of the Pentagon's vault, submitting a formal request for an approved honeymoon to Paris. Officers with his level of top-secret SCI clearance were strictly prohibited from keeping such documents at home. There was no answer from the living room. She peeked down the hallway. David was sitting on the sofa, his posture rigidly straight, a phone pressed tightly to his ear. She knew that pose all too well. It was how he sat when the conversation wasn't for unauthorized ears. She didn't ask again. Returning to the bedroom, she slipped both passports into the side pocket of his black leather travel organizer. Next to it lay two folded dress shirts, light blue and crisp white, the ones he wore most often. She had already ironed the collars and cuffs, carefully pressing the creases where they were least likely to wrinkle. The silver 2.8-inch Samsonite suitcase lay open on the floor. She had started packing it 3 days ago. Sunscreen, a European power adapter, a bottle of his blood pressure medication. David had high blood pressure. The DoD medical boards at Walter Reed had red-flagged it for 3 years straight, but he always forgot to take his pills. She placed the bottle in the outermost pocket of his toiletry bag so it would be the first thing he saw when he unzipped it. The voice in the living room stopped. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. David appeared in the bedroom doorway. At 6'2", he filled almost the entire frame. He glanced at the open suitcase on the floor, then looked at her. Tomorrow's flight is canceled. Emma's hand froze in midair. Her fingers were still gripping a pair of folded socks. Canceled. The Joint Chiefs called an emergency coordination briefing for the upcoming Allied drills. Orders from the top. His tone was flat, as if he were reporting a work schedule that didn't concern him in the slightest. We're postponing the honeymoon by 2 weeks. I already notified the travel agency. I'll hand the passport back to the SSO tomorrow. She dropped the socks into the side pocket of the suitcase without breaking her rhythm. I'll unpack the bags then. Yeah. He turned and walked away. From the moment he appeared to his disappearance, less than 40 seconds had passed. Emma crouched in front of the suitcase and began taking things out one by one. Sunscreen adapter, blood pressure pills, 2 shirts, his gym shorts, her new lightweight floral sundress. She had bought that dress specifically for the honeymoon. The tags were still on it. She carefully folded it and shoved it into the deepest corner of her closet. Her phone screen lit up. A text from her best friend Chloe. What time is the flight tomorrow? I'll come see you guys off. Emma typed a single word: postponed. She hit send, then placed the phone face down on the bed. She didn't cry, and she didn't sigh. She just zipped up the empty half of the suitcase and pushed it into the corner of the walk-in closet. The wheels rolled over the hardwood floor, emitting a dull, hollow rumble. This was the 11th month of their marriage. The honeymoon had already been delayed twice. The first time was due to a base inspection early in the year. The second time was because of a spring security audit. Both times she had simply said, okay. This was the third. The timer on the kitchen oven beeped. Emma stood up, walked to the kitchen, and turned off the stove. Inside a pot, a rich chicken noodle soup had been simmering for 2 hours. The broth was golden herbs floating on the surface. She skimmed the excess fat with a spoon, ladled the soup into a bowl, and carried it to the door of his home office. Soup's ready. David didn't even look up, merely turning a page of the document in his hand. Put it on the desk. She placed the bowl on the edge of the desk in the third section, from the right. A silicone coaster sat there, which she had bought specifically for him. When she bought it, she had meticulously measured the exact spot where he usually set his mug. Before leaving the office, she looked at his back. White t-shirt, the sharp, rigid line of his shoulder blades. He never looked back at her. She closed the door. The next morning, Emma was watering the fiddle-leaf fig on the balcony of their Arlington apartment. Her phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. A New York area code. She answered. Hello, is this Mrs. Emma Walker? Yes, speaking. This is Elite Travel Concierge. Your husband isn't answering his phone, so we're calling the backup number on file. Regarding tomorrow's departure to the Maldives Emirates flight, EK 232 out of Dulles. We just want to confirm the private seaplane transfer you requested. The watering can in Emma's hand tilted. Water overflowed from the pot and pooled along the grout lines of the balcony tiles. The Maldives. A foreign country, a place where active duty officers required immense vetting to visit. You said, tomorrow's departure. Yes, ma'am. June 2nd. Flight EK 232 departing at 10:20 a.m. from Washington Dulles. Passenger names are David Walker and... Paper rustled on the other end. Eleanor Morgan. The transfer is booked for 2 adjacent overwater villas. Is that correct? Water from the balcony trickled toward the living room threshold. Emma set the watering can on the floor. Her hand didn't tremble, but she felt her heart beating somewhere in her throat, hammering so hard she couldn't speak. Are you still on the line, ma'am? When she finally answered, her voice hadn't changed. The inflection of every word was absolutely perfect. Yes, everything is correct. Keep the reservation as is. Thank you. She hung up. Standing on the balcony, she looked down at the puddle at her feet. The morning sun reflected off the water, blinding her. She knew the name Eleanor Morgan. Before the wedding, she had flipped through David's old photo albums. In his high school pictures, a slender girl with long hair stood next to him, smiling sweetly. She had asked who it was. He replied, a childhood friend. She moved out of state a long time ago. Not another word. She mopped up the water on the balcony, rinsed the watering can, and put it on the second shelf of the utility rack. Then she sat on the sofa, opened the Safari app on her phone, and typed in the flight number EK 232. Washington to Mail via Dubai, departing at 10:20 a.m. tomorrow. And yet her husband had stood in the bedroom doorway last night telling her tomorrow's flight was canceled because the Pentagon had an emergency coordination briefing. She opened her iMessage thread with David. Her last message had been sent at 9:00 p.m. last night. Your blood pressure pills are in the outer pocket of your toiletry bag. He hadn't replied. She scrolled up through their chat history. Their conversations always looked like this. She would write 2 or 3 texts. He would reply with 1. Sometimes it was, yeah, sometimes. Okay. His longest reply from the past week. The general's reception is Saturday afternoon. Be ready. She had never seen the name Eleanor Morgan in his phone. Not because he hid it well, but because she had never checked his phone. She hadn't looked because she trusted him. Emma closed iMessage and opened the Amazon app. A woven straw beach bag she ordered 3 days ago had just been delivered to an Amazon locker down the street. She hadn't picked it up yet. She tapped the Initiate Return button. At 2:00 p.m., she walked to the Whole Foods nearby. The fridge had 2 cartons of milk, left enough for 3 days, and 5 eggs. She bought fresh parsley, a block of sharp cheddar, a pint of cherry tomatoes, and a container of fresh sweet cherries. He loved cherries. She always washed them and placed them in a white porcelain bowl on the coffee table so he could grab a handful as he walked by. Pushing her cart past the produce section, she moved at the exact same pace as always. There was a line at the register. The woman in front of her was taking forever to dig through her purse. Emma waited. Her eyes fell on the lighter display near the register. She remembered how he had been talking on the phone yesterday. His spine had been perfectly straight. It wasn't the tension he usually had when speaking to his commanding officers. It was something else. Something she couldn't name then but could identify now. Shoulders slightly raised his body, leaning forward just a fraction, as if trying to get closer to the person on the other end of the line. Because of the distance, she hadn't heard the conversation, but she remembered his final phrase. I'll handle it, I'll make it happen. Not I'll look into it. Not understood. But I'll make it happen. He had used that phrase with her once. When they were renovating their new apartment, she mentioned she wanted floor-to-ceiling windows. He had said, okay, I'll make it happen. And the windows were installed. She had thought it meant he cared. It was her turn. She placed the cherries, parsley, cheese, and a bottle of soy sauce on the conveyor belt. She tapped her phone to pay. Back home, she washed the cherries, patted each one dry with a paper towel, arranged them in the white porcelain bowl, and placed it dead center on the coffee table. At 7:00 p.m., David returned. The sound of his hard-soled uniform Oxfords clicked against the entryway tiles. She was searing steaks in the kitchen. The exhaust fan hummed loudly. She didn't need to go out to greet him. What's for dinner? Steak, a salad, roasted potatoes, and leftover soup. Got it. His footsteps headed toward the living room. She knew his routine first. He'd drink a glass of water, then sit down and stare at his phone for 10 minutes. She flipped the meat in the pan, checking the sear. The medium rare was perfect. She turned off the heat, plated the steaks, and garnished them with parsley. When she brought all 4 dishes to the dining table, David was already sitting. His plate was aligned perfectly. His fork was on the left tines down. He always placed it that way because he was left-handed. As he ate, he glanced at his phone, typed a few words, and flipped it face down. What time are you leaving tomorrow? Emma asked. David's hand holding the fork froze for less than half a second before resuming its motion. A car from the base is picking me up at 7:00 a.m. I'll wake up at 6:00 and make breakfast. Don't bother. I'll grab something at the cafeteria. Okay. He bowed his head over his soup. The temperature of the broth was perfect, not scalding. He quickly finished his steak. For the rest of the meal, he didn't say a single word concerning her. When he finished, he pushed his plate slightly away. "I'm heading to the office." "Yeah, I'll clear the table." He left. Emma gathered the dishes. Half a roasted potato remained on his plate. She moved it to her own plate and washed his. The water ran loudly in the sink. Her eyes felt hot just for a second, and then she simply turned the faucet up higher. At 10:00 p.m., when she stepped out of the shower, David was already in bed, facing the wall. His breathing was steady. Wearing her nightgown, she stood by the bed for 3 seconds, then pulled back the duvet and lay on her side. It was a king-sized bed. A clear, invisible border ran down the middle, not drawn, but indented. They slept in their respective grooves and never crossed it. She remembered their wedding night. He had hugged her, but only once, very briefly, as if executing a programmed protocol, and then said, "Let's get some sleep." In 11 months of marriage, the number of times he had touched her could be counted on one hand. She had thought he was just exhausted. She thought it was military discipline and stoicism. She thought things would improve over time when he became less busy when the honeymoon finally happened. When they had time just for the two of them. She had kept waiting. Now she knew where that time had gone. She turned on her side and looked at his back. The straight line of his spine under his white t-shirt, the broad shoulders, the steady breathing. He was sleeping perfectly peacefully. Tomorrow at 7:00 a.m., he would get dressed, leave the house, tell her he was going to the Pentagon, and instead head to Dulles Airport to sit in business class on a flight to the Maldives. This was her life. Emma closed her eyes, her nails digging into her palms. She felt the sting of the pressure on her skin growing sharper millimeter by millimeter. She hid her hands under the blankets. Her face betrayed not a single emotion. Early morning 5:40 a.m. The sky hadn't lightened yet. Emma woke up 20 minutes before her alarm. She didn't open her eyes. She could still feel his weight on the mattress. His breathing maintained its rhythm. She waited. 5:55 a.m. He turned. The mattress springs creaked slightly. He got up. The sound of water running in the master bathroom. She lay there with her eyes closed, listening 2 minutes for brushing teeth, washing his face, the hum of an electric razor. The closet door opened and closed. Footsteps left the bedroom and headed for the entryway. She heard him open the shoe cabinet. Usually he left for duty in his uniform Oxfords or combat boots, but today she heard the dull thud of leather slip-ons, the brown loafers they had bought together. The salesman at Nordstrom had said, "These are perfect for a resort vacation." And David, who rarely smiled, had smiled at her and said, "We'll take them then." He had never worn them. He put them on today. The quiet jingle of keys, then the sound of the heavy front door opening. Emma opened her eyes. The ceiling was white. A grayish-blue light seeped through the crack in the curtains. The deadbolt clicked. He was gone. No goodbye. No, I'm heading out. He hadn't even peeked into the bedroom to look at her one last time. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling fixture. She had installed those LED bulbs herself, comparing the color temperature specs from half a dozen brands online to find the one closest to natural daylight. All because he had once mentioned, "The light in this house is too yellow." For 11 months of marriage, everything she did was to make his life more comfortable. She put labeled stickers on the Tupperware in the fridge. His shirts were color-coordinated from light to dark by her hands. The files on his desk were arranged by her to be within easy reach. She remembered his blood pressure dosage better than he did, and he gave their honeymoon to another woman. Emma sat up. She wasn't crying. She picked up her phone from the nightstand, opened the Emirates app, and typed in, "Flight EK 232. Flight status check-in closed." Passenger info couldn't be viewed, but the departure time was written in stark black and white, 10:20 a.m. It was currently 6:10 a.m. He was lying. She got up and walked to the bathroom. The face in the mirror was pale, her lips dry. She turned on the tap and splashed cold water on her face. As the freezing water hit her skin, she noticed a hair on the edge of the sink. Long black, not hers. She had dyed her hair chestnut brown 3 months ago. She stared at the hair for 2 seconds, took a tissue, picked it up, and threw it in the trash can. At 6:30 a.m., she stood in the kitchen making plain oatmeal. She didn't add brown sugar or milk, just a pinch of salt. She ate very slowly, chewing each spoonful deliberately. Halfway through, she set her spoon down, opened Safari on her phone, and went to the Emirates website. Flight EK 232 June, to Washington to Mail. Business class 0 seats available. She took a screenshot of the page. Then she closed the browser, opened iMessage, and found David's thread. The last message was still hers from last night. "Your blood pressure pills are in the outer pocket of your toiletry bag. He hadn't replied. She set the phone on the table, finished the rest of her oatmeal, washed the bowl, and wiped the countertop dry so not a single drop of water remained. On the coffee table in the living room sat the white bowl of washed cherries from last night. He hadn't eaten a single one. She stood in the middle of the living room and surveyed the apartment. 1,200 square feet, 2 bedrooms, their marital home. During the renovation, she took a month of unpaid leave from her job to manage the contractors every day. She spent 2 days at hardware stores, choosing the living room curtains so they would block the light without making the room feel gloomy. She moved the sofa 3 times until it was perfectly aligned with the center axis of the TV. She had installed a secondary shelf under the coffee table herself, just so he had a place to stack his military strategy journals. Her fingerprint was on every detail, yet there were no photos of her in this house. Not in the entryway, not in the living room, not in the office. Only on the nightstand in the bedroom was there a single framed picture which she had placed face down because it was their wedding photo, and he felt that displaying it openly was too flashy. She walked over and picked up the frame. In the photo, she was in a white wedding gown, smiling with all her might, her eyes crinkled into crescents. He was in his army dress blues, looking incredibly stiff, staring dead into the lens. A barely noticeable half-smile touched his lips. The distance between them, her shoulder was pressed against his arm, but his arm made no attempt to wrap around her. She placed the frame back on the nightstand face down. 9:00 a.m. She sat on the sofa. The TV was on muted. Her phone rested on her lap. 9:15 a.m. The phone lit up. A text from David. Just got to the Pentagon. Going to be a late night. She stared at the message, typed, "Okay," sent it. The delivered status appeared. Nothing more. She put the phone down and looked at the muted TV. A news anchor was reporting on an economic summit in D.C. People in business suits were standing on a stage. The closed captions scrolled too fast. Got to the Pentagon or got to the airport. 9:40 a.m. She opened the app and checked the flight status. Boarding complete. Estimated departure 10:20 a.m. Right now, he should be sitting in the Emirates lounge at Dulles next to Eleanor Morgan. Maybe they were drinking coffee. Maybe he was smiling that smile she had never seen. Or maybe he was saying words to this woman he had never said to her. Like, "I've missed you." Like, "It's been too long." Or maybe he wasn't saying anything. Maybe they were just sitting next to each other very close. Emma got up, walked to the kitchen sink, and turned on the tap. Water poured over her hands. It was cold. She held both hands under the stream, spreading her fingers, letting the water flow between them. There was a lump in her throat. She didn't want to cry. It was something duller, as if someone had placed a stone slab on her chest. Not painful, just impossible to breathe. She turned off the water, dried her hands, returned to the living room, and sat back on the sofa. The TV still played its silent images. A silent house. A notification popped up from the airline app. Flight EK 232 has departed. Emma stared at that line of text for a long time. Then she locked her phone, set it on the coffee table, picked up the remote, and unmuted the TV. The meteorologist was talking about the weather. Expect highs near 90 degrees in the DC metro area today. Stay hydrated if you're out in the sun. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows straight onto the sofa. She felt slightly warm. Here it was her honeymoon. Sitting alone in a 1,200 square foot apartment, listening to the weather forecast, watching the sunbeams crawl across the hardwood floor. Meanwhile, her husband was flying another woman to the exact destination they were supposed to visit, blatantly violating federal military protocol. Emma picked up the bowl of cherries, walked to the kitchen, and dumped the entire contents into the trash can. She washed the white porcelain bowl, dried it completely, and put it away in the cupboard. Her movements were incredibly light, her footsteps silent. It was so quiet in the apartment, it felt as if no one had ever lived there. June 3, 22 hours after the flight departed. Emma sat at the computer in the home office. At work, David was clinically paranoid about OPSEC, but he treated his home laptop as an impenetrable fortress. His personal Gmail account was always logged in. She knew the password too, DW031689. His initials and his birth date. He never changed it. There were over 400 unread emails in the inbox. She didn't scroll through them all. She just typed into the search bar Eleanor Morgan. 3 seconds later, the search yielded 17 results. The first email was dated January 9th of this year, the 3rd month of their marriage. She didn't open them right away. First, she opened the Notes app on her phone, created a new document, and named it 0602. Then she began reading them one by one. First email. Jan 9. From Eleanor. Subject landed. Text. I'm here. Smooth flight. Don't worry. David's reply? Good. Get some rest. Third email. Feb 14. Subject empty. Text. A photo of a latte. A crooked heart drawn in the foam. No words. David's reply. Talented. Seventh email. March 20. Eleanor, that DoD project you mentioned. I can help push it through on our end. Do you have time to jump on a call Saturday, David? Saturday at 3 p.m.? Emma's fingers froze on the mouse. Saturday, March 20. She remembered that Saturday. He had told her he was going to the Pentagon to work overtime and told her not to wait up for dinner. She had roasted a pork loin that day, waited until 9:00 p.m. The meat got cold, she reheated it, it got cold again. When he finally came home, she was already asleep. She kept reading. 11th email. April 15. A very long email from Eleanor. Emma's eyes skimmed the text and locked onto a paragraph in the middle. Sometimes I think I left too abruptly back then. If I hadn't moved out of state, where do you think we'd be right now? David's reply consisted of one sentence. Don't dwell on the past. Live in the present. Emma took a screenshot and saved it to the note. 15th email. May 20, 13 days ago. Eleanor, visas are cleared. Did you book yet? David got business class. Do you want me to buy you a connecting ticket or direct? Eleanor, direct is easier. I'll buy it myself. Save your money. David already bought it. Same flight. Fly into DC the day before. I'll arrange the transfer. Emma's breathing didn't hitch. Her hand steadily took a screenshot and pasted it into the note. Last email, May 28, 4 days ago. Eleanor, see you tomorrow. David, see you tomorrow. Good night. Timestamp 11:43 p.m. That night at 11:43 p.m., Emma remembered exactly what she was doing. She was lying in bed, her back facing his, listening to him scrolling through something on his phone screen. She had thought he was reading the news. She closed Gmail. She didn't delete a single trace, didn't mark any unread emails as read, but she did clear the browser history. There were now 14 screenshots in her phone's Notes app. She locked the screen, placed the phone on the desk, rested her hands on either side of the keyboard and looked at the tips of her fingers. Her nails were trimmed short, painted with a clear top coat, because he had once mentioned he hated flashy manicures. She clenched her fists. Her knuckles cracked softly. Then she stood up. June 3 afternoon. Emma pulled out the bottom drawer of the desk in the office. Inside was a plastic accordion folder containing documents she had organized herself before the wedding. Their marriage certificate, passports, the lease agreement for the apartment, the car title, and paperwork for their 2 bank accounts. She pulled the entire folder out, placed it on the desk, and began sorting through the documents one by one. Car title. Owner David Walker. Bank cards. 2. One was her personal checking, the other a joint checking account for household expenses. The joint account was in Emma's name, but it was linked to David's phone number for text alerts. Reaching the back, she found a document she had almost forgotten about, a certificate of deposit CD from Chase Bank for $30,000 locked in for a year. Maturity date, July 1st. This was her pre-marital savings. When she got married, she had moved it to an account linked to their joint profile. Back then, she viewed it as a gesture of absolute trust. Now she needed to take it back. She opened the Chase app, entered her password, and went to the CD section. There were 28 days left until maturity. Early withdrawal meant losing 3 months of interest. She tapped Withdraw Early. The system flashed a warning, Confirm early closure. You will forfeit approximately $250 in interest. She tapped Confirm. $29,750. The funds would clear by tomorrow. Next, she checked the joint checking account. Balance $4,200. Of that $1, $500 was the monthly allowance David transferred for groceries and utilities. The rest was money she had saved by taking freelance Russian-English translation gigs online. She transferred the entire $4,200 to her personal Bank of America account. Then she disabled Zelle for the Chase account. Finally, she went into the profile settings and deleted David's phone number from the SMS alert system. Having completed those 3 steps, she looked at the clock. 7 p.m. She still had time. June 3, 5 p.m. Emma dialed a number. Chloe, you there? Yeah, hey, what's going on? Aren't you guys supposed to be on your honeymoon? We didn't go. Can you talk? Are you home? I'm home. Why do you sound weird? I need a favor, Emma said. I need the contact info for a divorce attorney. Silence hung on the line for 3 whole seconds. Emma, what happened? Just find me one. Preferably someone who has experience with military divorces. Okay, Em. Are you safe? I'm fine. Once I'm done sorting this out, I'll tell you everything. She hung up. Chloe called back an hour and a half later. Found someone. Michael Evans' partner at a firm downtown. He handles messy divorces for high-ranking officers. I texted you his contact card. Thank you. Emma hung up and texted the lawyer. He replied within 10 minutes. Emma wrote, Hello, Mr. Evans. I was referred by Chloe. I need a consultation for a divorce proceeding. The respondent is an active-duty lieutenant colonel. I have hard evidence of infidelity. I plan to file, but I will not be physically present for the hearings as I am leaving the country. When are you available to meet? The reply was swift. Tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. Bring all the materials you mentioned. We'll discuss drafting a power of attorney. Emma understood. She set the phone down. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sun was beginning to set over Virginia. Orange light flooded the hardwood floor. She sat in the office chair, leaning back against the memory foam lumbar pillow. She had ordered that pillow online because he used to complain about lower back pain from sitting at a desk all day. She pulled the pillow out from behind her back and tossed it across the room. June 3910 p.m. She opened her laptop and went to seek.com.au, an Australian job board. She typed into the search bar, Russian English translator, interpreter, location Sydney CBD. Dozens of results popped up. She began filtering them. Excluded those requiring permanent residency. Excluded part-time roles. 3 remained. One was an in-house translator at an international audit firm. The second was for an immigration agency. The third was a freelance contract translator for the Australian National Audit Office ANAO. Requirements NAATI. Level 3 certification. Emma had earned her NAATY Level 3 certification for Russian 2 years ago. Back then, she wasn't married and worked full-time at a translation bureau, making a decent salary. After the wedding, David told her she didn't need to work anymore. His military salary was more than enough. She had quit, but her certification was still active. She bookmarked all 3 listings, then opened the Australian immigration portal. Her work and holiday visa, which she had secured before the pandemic and somehow managed to defer, was still valid until the end of the year. She could use it. She went to Emirates' website and searched for flights from Washington, D.C. to Sydney for June 5th, the day after tomorrow. There were still economy seats left. She didn't book immediately. She needed to confirm one detail. How long was David's trip to the Maldives? She reopened his Gmail. The morning session hadn't timed out. She searched the name of the resort. The booking confirmation popped up. Check-in June 2. Check-out June 7 noon. That meant he wouldn't be back until June 7th. Today was June 3rd. She had 4 days. She went back to the Emirates tab and bought the ticket for June 5th. Economy class, one way, one passenger. Her card was charged $1,650. Ticket confirmed. June 4, 10:00 a.m. Michael Evans' law office was on the 19th floor of a sleek building in downtown D.C. Emma arrived right on time. Evans was in his late 40s, had a sharp haircut, and spoke quickly. He flipped through the stack of papers she had brought. Printouts of email screenshots. The Emirates flight confirmation. Bank statements. Your husband is a lieutenant colonel, yes. Active duty, Emma said. Divorce proceedings in Virginia are generally straightforward, but if he contests it or refuses to sign, the court mandates a separation period that can drag out for months, the lawyer explained. Are you prepared for a drawn-out process? Yes. I'm moving overseas tomorrow. You'll handle everything. Evans looked up at her. Given his rank and his SCI clearance, his wife suddenly moving to a foreign country, even an allied one, is going to trigger a security review. The moment this petition hits the docket, his command and the DCSA are going to want to know why. A messy public divorce is the last thing he wants, and flying off to the Maldives without approved foreign travel leave, that's a massive UCMJ violation. We have colossal leverage. You can subpoena the passenger manifest for Emirates Flight 232. Emma's voice was flat, as if reading a quarterly earnings report. They flew in the same cabin. The transfer was for 2 villas. He paid for the booking. If necessary, I'll use the power of attorney to petition the court for an order to pull his CBP exit records the moment he lands back in the States, Evans said, setting the papers down. You came incredibly well prepared. Good. She pulled a printed form from her bag. I drafted the power of attorney yesterday. Review it, and let me know if the language holds up. Evans took the paper and scanned it. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smirk, but surprise. It's airtight. Sign it, Emma signed. Her signature was firm and legible. Your retainer fee. One-time payment. She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. Wire transfer or check. Wire works. A notification pinged. Evans checked his screen. $2,000 received. He slipped the power of attorney into a folder. I'll file the petition on June 8th. The court will serve him after he returns. You need to be prepared for the fact that he or his commanding officers might try to contact you to bury this. I know. Emma stood up and slung her bag over her shoulder. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Keep me posted. She left. June 4 afternoon. Returning to the apartment, Emma dragged out the 2 8-inch silver Samsonite suitcase. This time she was packing for herself. She didn't have many clothes. A few t-shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, a light jacket. June in Sydney meant winter. She needed to pack layers. She rummaged through the closet. Most of her heavier clothes were bought before the wedding. The styles were a bit dated but wearable. She opened the bathroom cabinet and grabbed her toiletries, toothbrush, face cream, micellar water, and her blister pack of birth control pills. She stared at the foil pack. 11 pills left. Since the day they got married, she was the only one managing birth control. David never even asked about it. She tossed the blister pack into the trash can. Passports. She walked to the entryway and opened the side pocket of the black travel organizer. There was only one passport inside. David had secretly taken his own on June 2nd before he left. She took hers and opened it. Valid for another 3 years. When she zipped the suitcase shut, a third of it was still empty. Her entire life couldn't even fill 1 2 8-inch piece of luggage. June 4, 8:00 p.m. Emma cleaned the apartment one last time. Not for him, but out of her own habit, to leave a place exactly as she had found it. She scrubbed the kitchen counters twice, threw away everything in the fridge that could spoil, leaving only the unopened carton of milk and a few eggs. She tied off the trash bag and took it to the chute down the hall. The coffee table in the living room gleamed. The white porcelain bowl sat in its usual spot empty. In the office, she only took her NAATI certificate and a few translation dictionaries. She didn't touch his paperwork. The computer was shut down and pushed back into place. In the bedroom, she made the bed flawlessly. The duvet was smoothed out without a single wrinkle, the pillows perfectly symmetrical. The photo frame on the nightstand lay face down. She hesitated for a second, then flipped it face up. Let him see it when he gets back. Finally, she stood in the entryway and changed her shoes. The top shelf of the shoe rack was hers, the bottom his. She had packed all her shoes, leaving 4 empty slots glaring back. She pulled out her keychain, the building fob, and 2 keys to the apartment. She placed her keys on the console right next to his black leather organizer. Next to the keys, she placed something else. Her copy of their marriage certificate. She opened it to the page with the state seal and their signatures face up. She left nothing else. No note, no text message, no explanation. June 5, 6:00 a.m. The Uber was already waiting outside the apartment complex. Emma walked out the glass doors with her silver suitcase. The wheels clicked against the pavement. In the quiet morning air, the sound was exceptionally sharp. She got into the car. Dulles Airport, the driver asked. Yes. As the car pulled onto the street, she looked through the rear window at the building. 18th floor, 3rd window from the left. The floor-to-ceiling windows of their living room, the curtains were drawn. You couldn't see anything from the outside. She turned around and stared at the road. Her phone lit up. A text from David briefing is going to run late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. He was still sending these messages. Sitting in a resort in the Maldives, he was still maintaining the lie that he was stuck at the Pentagon. Emma stared at the text. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a second. She typed, "Okay." Sent it. Then she went into the chat settings and muted his notifications. She opened her WhatsApp profile and changed her picture from a white camellia to a faceless photo of autumn trees. The city blurred past the window. Morning rush hour hadn't started yet. The roads were mostly empty. A bright white streak of light appeared on the horizon. The sun hadn't fully risen. Emma put her phone in her purse. Her flight departed at 10:20 a.m. Accounting for the layover in Dubai, she would land in Sydney in roughly 24 hours. It would be 11:00 p.m. local time. She had booked a hostel near Sydney Airport for her first night for $80. She hadn't told anyone exactly where she was going. Chloe only knew she had to leave. The lawyer would be given her Australian phone number once she bought a local SIM card. Right now, 9,000 miles away in the Maldives, David was probably sitting by an infinity pool, or having breakfast with Eleanor Morgan, or still asleep. He didn't know she was no longer in their apartment. He didn't know the joint accounts were emptied. He didn't know a lawyer was drafting a divorce petition. He didn't know that when he returned a set of keys, an open marriage certificate, and a half-empty closet would be waiting for him. He didn't know a thing. He thought she was still waiting at home just like the past 11 months. Cooking dinner, ironing shirts, wiping down counters, just waiting for him to walk in and say, yeah. Emma leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. This was the last time she would ever wake up in the morning silence of this city. The Uber merged onto the highway toward the airport. June 7:10 p.m. David slid his key into the deadbolt and turned it. The entryway was dark. He flicked the switch. Light flooded the space, illuminating the empty console table. Keys lay on the console. His gaze locked onto them for a half-second. It was his spare set. The building fob and the apartment keys were bound together by a white lanyard he hadn't seen before. The keys sat neatly beside his black travel organizer, and next to them was a thick, textured document. He picked it up. Their marriage certificate opened to the page with the embossed seal. David stood with the certificate in his hand for 5 seconds. Emma, no answer. He kicked off his shoes and took long strides into the living room. The sofa was empty. On the spotless coffee table sat a clean, empty white bowl. The TV was off. Emma. No one in the kitchen. The stove was wiped down so thoroughly there wasn't a streak of grease left. He opened the fridge. Almost empty. Just a carton of milk and a few eggs. In the office, the computer was off. The files were in their proper places, but several books were missing from the second shelf. He walked into the bedroom. The bed was made with military precision. The duvet perfectly flat, the 2 pillows symmetrical. He opened the closet. The left side, his side, was completely untouched. The right side, hers, was barren. Not entirely empty. A few older coats remained, but the wooden bases of most shelves were exposed. He pulled open the 3 bottom drawers. No underwear, no pajamas. He turned and looked at the nightstand. The photo frame was flipped face up. Their wedding picture. David's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. The caller you are trying to reach is currently unavailable. He called again. Same automated voice. He opened iMessage. Their last exchange was on the morning of June 5th. He had written, "Briefing is going to run late, don't wait up." She had replied, "Okay, nothing more." He typed, "Where are you?" Hit send. It didn't say delivered, just green bubbles. She had turned off iMessage or her phone was dead. He switched to WhatsApp, sent the same message. 1 gray checkmark. The message hit the server but hadn't been delivered to her device. He typed, "Call me back." Another single checkmark. David stood in the middle of the bedroom, gripping his phone so hard his knuckles turned white. He called Chloe. 3 rings. "Yeah, it's David. Is Emma with you?" A 2-second pause on the other end. "No. Where is she?" "I don't know. You're her best friend. She hasn't contacted you." Chloe's voice hardened. All politeness vanished. "Before you go interrogating me, maybe interrogate yourself. You don't even know when your own wife left you." He remained silent. "She didn't tell me where she was going." Chloe clipped. "If she wanted you to know, she would have told you herself." She hung up. David lowered the phone. The screen still showed call ended. Duration 4-7 seconds. He walked back to the entryway and picked up the keys again. The lanyard was brand new, not something they owned. She went out of her way to buy a lanyard, string the keys together, and leave them. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. He snapped the marriage certificate shut and stood there for a long time, pressing his palm flat against the heavy paper cover. June 7, same time. Sydney, Australia. Emma sat in the common area of her hostel. Her laptop was open. On the screen was a draft of an email. "Dear hiring manager, I am writing to express my interest in the contract translator position at the Australian National Audit Office, ANAO." She typed a paragraph, paused, moved the cursor to the second line, deleted extensive experience, and replaced it with 5 years of NAATI certified practice. A paper cup of cheap instant coffee sat on the table. It had already gone cold. This was her second day in Sydney. On the first day, she had bought a local SIM card, opened a Commonwealth bank account, and converted her USD into Australian dollars. On the second day, she had walked into 3 translation agencies and dropped off her resume. One of them had immediately asked her to take a translation test. Today was the 3rd day, and she was writing a cover letter for the Australian government agency. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. WhatsApp notifications. From David. "Where are you?" She stared at it for a second, then flipped the phone face down and kept typing. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. She didn't look. The cover letter was done. She proofread it, tweaked a few prepositions, checked the formatting, and hit send. The email went out at 10:12 p.m. Sydney time. She closed her laptop, picked up the cold coffee, and took a sip. Then she picked up her phone and checked the messages. There were 2. Where are you and call me back? She scrolled up. Her last message was okay, sent on June 5th while she was in the Uber to Dulles. She closed the chat without replying. June 8, Washington, D.C. David woke up at 6:00 a.m. and splashed freezing water on his face. Dark purple bags hung under his eyes. He had barely slept, tossing and turning until 3:00 a.m. It wasn't jet lag 5 days in the Maldives hadn't messed up his internal clock. It was because he had checked his phone every 30 minutes. No response. He put on his Army combat uniform and left for work. There was a morning briefing at the Pentagon. In the afternoon, he had to submit the logistics plan for the upcoming drills. His schedule was identical to any other day, but at 10:00 a.m., he did something out of character. He drove over to the translation agency in Arlington, where Emma used to work. The receptionist was young and didn't recognize him. "Excuse me, does Emma Walker still work here, or Emma Smith, her maiden name?" The girl checked the database. She resigned late last year. She no longer works here. "Do you have her updated contact information?" "I'm sorry, sir. We don't disclose former employees' personal information." "I'm her husband." The receptionist looked up at him. The military uniform, the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel on his chest, the grim expression on his face. She clearly felt intimidated but shook her head. "I'm sorry, but we really don't have her new info." David turned on his heel and walked out. Sitting in his car, he dialed her number again. Goes straight to voicemail. He opened his contacts and scrolled through their mutual acquaintances. The list was incredibly short. Emma's social circle had always been tight. Aside from Chloe, he could only think of her parents. He hesitated for 3 seconds before dialing his father-in-law's number. "Hello, David." The older man's voice was cautious but warm. "Have you heard from Emma in the last few days?" "We have. She called the day before yesterday. Said you guys finally took your honeymoon to Australia. Told us not to worry." David tightened his grip on the steering wheel. A cover story. She had even planted a cover story. "Australia," David repeated flatly. "Yeah, she said the views are beautiful. Why aren't you right next to her?" "I am. The cell reception is just spotty. I'll have her call you back later." He hung up. Australia. He sat in the driver's seat, staring at his phone. He opened Safari and searched flights D.C. to Australia past 3 days. June 9, Sydney. Emma walked into a corporate high-rise on Martin Place. The Collinsburg agency, where she had taken the translation test yesterday, had called her in for an interview. The interviewer was an Australian woman in her 50s, with short hair and red glasses, who spoke like a machine gun. "Your written test results were outstanding. 98% accuracy, the highest score in this hiring pool. But I have one question." Emma sat across from her back, perfectly straight, hands resting calmly on her lap. "Your resume shows NAATI certification, but a gap in employment over the last year. Why?" "Personal reasons which have been fully resolved." The manager looked at her and didn't push it. "We operate at a high tempo. Turnaround time for commercial legal documents is strictly 48 hours. Are you prepared for overtime?" "Yes." "Can you start Monday? 3-month probation?" "The rate is $42 AUD an hour. We'll discuss a bump after probation." "That works for me." The manager stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome aboard, Emma." Leaving the office, Emma bought a hot latte at a cafe on the ground floor. Sunlight cut through the glass doors. June in Sydney was winter. The temperature barely cracked 60 degrees, but the sky was a piercing, cloudless blue. She took a sip. The hot coffee scalded her tongue slightly. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. A U.S. number. David Walker. She watched his name flash 6 times. Then she hit decline. June 9. Virginia, 2:30 p.m. User busy. David stood on his apartment balcony, the phone pressed to his ear. He hadn't even taken off his uniform jacket. He had just gotten back from base. He dialed again. It rang and rang. Over 10 rings. No answer. He slammed his phone against the metal balcony railing. It didn't shatter, but the sound of metal on metal was vicious. Declined and turned off were 2 very different things. The first time the call went through but was cut off after 6 rings. She declined it. She heard it ring, saw his name, and actively chose to hang up. David walked back into the living room. The apartment was silent. It wasn't the silence of people just not speaking. It was a physical emptiness. No sounds from the kitchen, no hum from the laundry machine, no splashing of water on the balcony plants. He had never really noticed those noises before, but now their absence was deafening. He went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. The milk had soured. The eggs were still there, but he had no idea when she bought them. They were probably bad too. Her handwritten sticky notes still clung to the shelves, dairy produce meat sauces written in her neat rounded cursive. He shut the fridge and opened the Uber Eats app. When he went to check out, the delivery address populated automatically. He suddenly realized she had set up this account for him. Even the delivery instructions "leave at door, do not knock" were written by her. He had never ordered delivery himself, because he had never needed to. June 11. Sydney. Emma's first day at work. The Collinsburg office was an open floor plan on the 14th floor. Her desk was by the window. Her morning assignment was a 20-page commercial contract, a joint venture agreement between an Eastern European export firm and an Australian mining partner. Dense legal terminology, but she translated rapidly. While studying for the NAATI exam, she had drilled hundreds of these texts. The muscle memory was still there. On her lunch break, she went downstairs, bought a sandwich, and sat on a bench in Martin Place. A busker was playing a relaxed acoustic tune slightly out of tune. Pigeons strutted around her boots. She took a bite and checked her phone. 3 WhatsApp messages, all from David. The first sent yesterday at 11:00 p.m. EDT, pick up the phone. The second this morning, where the hell are you? Come back. We need to talk. The third an hour ago, Emma, if you don't answer, I'm filing a missing persons report with the police. She finished her sandwich, crumpled the wrapper, and tossed it into a bin. She opened WhatsApp and typed 2 words, "Don't bother." Hit send. She knew he'd see those words and know she was alive, not kidnapped and completely fine. She just didn't want anything to do with him. After sending it, she muted the chat again, locked her phone, and slipped it into her coat pocket. June 11. The Pentagon. 2:00 p.m. David was sitting in a strategy meeting. His phone vibrated. He glanced down. A WhatsApp message from Emma. 2 words. Don't bother. He stared at those 2 words for 3 whole seconds. The major across the table called out, "Colonel Walker, you have the floor." He placed his phone face down. The meeting dragged on for 40 more minutes. His eyes were glued to the briefing packets, but he turned the pages noticeably slower. When the room cleared, he stayed seated. His XO lingered by the door. "Sir, range coordination is pushed to tomorrow." "Got it." The XO left. David picked up his phone again. "Don't bother. Don't bother with the police. Don't bother looking. Don't worry. None of your business." He had never received a message like this from her. For 11 months, she had only ever texted, "Okay, yeah, waiting for you." Never more than 3 words, but every word was submissive and accommodating. Now it was just 2 words, but the gravity had completely flipped. He started typing, "Get on a plane and come home right now." His thumb hovered over the send button. He waited 2 seconds, deleted it, and typed, "We need to talk." A minute passed, then 2, then 10. No answer. He tapped her profile. The picture was of autumn trees. It used to be a flower. He backed out and checked again, almost paranoid she had blocked him. Then he did something else. He opened his Chase banking app, intending to transfer money to the joint account, just to see what would happen. Halfway through the transfer, the system threw an error. Account unavailable for instant transfers. He tried again. Same error. He called Chase customer service. After 3 minutes on hold, a rep answered. "Hi, I want to check the status of a checking account. Account holder Emma Walker ending in. Are you a primary account holder, sir?" "No, I'm her husband." "I apologize, sir, but we cannot disclose information to third parties not listed on the account. The account holder will need to contact us directly." He hung up. Instant transfers disabled. That meant the account was entirely severed from his profile. His phone number was wiped. He couldn't send money, couldn't see the balance. When did she do this? He tried to build a timeline. It had to be sometime before June 5th, while she was still at home. While she was standing in front of him saying, "Okay," she was actively erasing his access to her life. David set his phone on the desk, interlaced his fingers, and pressed them against his forehead. He closed his eyes. Back in his home office on the silicone coaster on his desk, absolutely nothing sat there anymore. June 13. Sydney. Emma received an interview invitation from the ANAO audit office. The email arrived at 9:00 a.m. Interview scheduled for Monday at 2:00 p.m. Requirements: bring original NAATI certificate translation samples and 2 letters of recommendation. Recommendation letters. She could ask the head of her old agency in D.C. for one. For the second, she thought for a moment, then opened LinkedIn and found her old university professor, an Australian who taught translation theory at Georgetown. She messaged him. 2 hours later, he replied, "Of course, Emma. Send me your updated CV. I'll have it ready by Friday." She replied, "Thank you, Professor." Work at Collinsburg had already become routine. By her 3rd day, she finished the 20-page contract. Her supervisor reviewed it, said nothing, and simply slid a massive binder across her desk, tender documentation. Deadline the day after tomorrow. Emma opened the file and got to work. June 13. D.C. Suburbs. David drove to Emma's parents' house for the 3rd time. The first 2 times he had stopped by under the guise of being in the neighborhood trying to fish for intel. But the older couple only knew that their daughter was in Australia on vacation and called them every other day. David already knew that because his mother-in-law had added, "Emma said the cell service out in the outback is terrible, so she might not be able to reach you. She told us not to worry." On this 3rd visit, her mother served him a bowl of homemade beef stew. He sat at the dining table while her father watched the news. "David, when are you heading back out to join her?" her father asked. Emma said she's extending the trip a few days. Soon. He ate the stew. The taste wasn't the same as Emma's. Emma always added a splash of red wine vinegar to give the broth depth. Her mother used regular white vinegar. He had never noticed the spices she used before. Leaving their house, he stood by his car on the suburban street. D.C. in June was a swamp. His dress shirt clung to his back. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He pulled out his phone and opened WhatsApp. Her last message was still, "Don't bother." She hadn't replied to his, "We need to talk." He typed again, "What is your endgame here?" Sent. A minute passed. He added, "Come home, we can figure this out." This time he waited a long time. The entire drive back to the Pentagon, his phone screen stayed dark. June 18. The Pentagon. David sat on a leather sofa in the office of the Director of Military Personnel. Across from him sat Colonel Miller flipping through a file. Finishing the last page, he closed the folder and slid it to the center of the desk. "Walker, I'll be blunt." Miller took off his glasses. "You're asking to use secure channels and CBP flags to track your wife's foreign travel. I'm not approving that. She's overseas, sir. I can't reach her. I need to confirm she's safe. Her parents say she calls them, but she's cut all contact with me. Then she's safe. She just doesn't want to talk to you. This isn't the Army's problem." David gripped the armrest of the sofa. "Then I'll route a request through local law enforcement." "I highly advise against that," Miller warned, putting his glasses back on. "You hold SCI clearance. Your wife abruptly fled to a foreign country. If you start making noise, or if she starts talking over there, DCSA counterintelligence will yank your clearance before you can blink. The promotion boards convene at the end of the year." "Do you want to pin on full colonel or not?" David stayed quiet. "Handle your domestic disputes behind closed doors," Miller added. "Do not drag the DOD into this. She's not home. Wait for her to come back. I'll tell you this for free. At your rank and position, a public scandal will sink your career. Permanently." David stood up. "Understood, sir." He walked out of the office and stood in the E-ring corridor for a moment. Sunlight sliced through the windows, casting bars of light on the linoleum. Standing in the shadows, he pulled out his phone. The chat with Emma was dead. He opened his contacts and found a name. Greg, an old buddy from West Point who now worked cyber intelligence at the Department of Homeland Security. Tracking border exits wasn't just limited to the military. If you had connections, you could pull strings. He hit call. "Greg, it's Dave Walker. You busy? Let's grab a beer." June 18, Sydney. Emma sat in a glass-walled conference room on the 8th floor of the ANAO building. Across from her sat a panel of 3, the project director, a senior auditor, and an HR rep. On the table lay her resume, a copy of her NAATI certificate, and her reference letters. The project director, a 50-something Aussie in a sharp gray suit, spoke deliberately. "Miss Walker. Miss Smith, please. I use my maiden name professionally. Miss Smith. This role involves translating highly sensitive audit documents concerning corporate compliance, specifically tracking international firms suspected of sanctions, evasion, and gray market supply chains. Many of these money trails lead back to Eastern European and Russian shell entities. Will you have any conflict of interest handling materials related to those regions?" Emma sat perfectly straight. "No." I have no conflict of interest. Elaborate. You have extensive ties to the DC defense sector through your recent residence. I work exclusively as a linguist. I have no political affiliations or obligations to any foreign or domestic government apparatus. My job is the precise translation of data, not its evaluation. The senior auditor flipped through her portfolio. Your test translation was flawless, but audit terminology is highly specific. Have you worked with ANAO reporting formats before? No, but over the past week, I reviewed your publicly available audit reports and drafted a mock translation based on your agency's performance review from last fiscal year. She pulled 3 stapled pages from her folder and slid them across the table. The interviewers exchanged glances. The project director picked up the pages and scanned them quickly. His eyebrows rose slightly. You did this on your own initiative, yes. The interview lasted another 20 minutes. As they wrapped up, the project director shook her hand. We'll be in touch by the end of the week. When Emma walked out of the building, a cold, misty winter rain was falling over Sydney. She didn't have an umbrella. She stood under the awning for a moment, pulled up the hood of her jacket, and stepped into the rain. June 20. Virginia. David took Greg out for dinner at a discreet steakhouse in Alexandria. They sat in a dimly lit booth. Greg, I need a favor. I need you to pull an exit record. Greg put his fork down and looked at him. Who? My wife. Greg's eyebrows shot up, but he stayed quiet, waiting. She's in Australia. Phone's off, not answering texts. I need to know which airport she flew out of, what day, and where exactly she landed. I know it's off the books, but run it through the DHS manifests. Maiden name Emma Smith. I'll text you her passport number. Greg swirled his bourbon. Fight misunderstanding. Once I find her, I'll fix it. Greg stayed quiet for a moment. All right, I'll look. But keep in mind the system logs every query. I can only pull her U.S. departure. I can't track her movements once she's foreign soil. Just the departure is fine. I need it in 2 days. June 22. Greg sent David a secure text on his personal phone. Smith E. Passport number. Departed June 5th out of Dulles IAD. Destination Sydney SYD. Flight Emirates via DXB. Economy class. Traveling alone. June 5th. The 4th day of his trip to the Maldives. The day she left the apartment. 1 passenger economy class. David sat in his Pentagon office staring at the screen. Outside, he could hear the faint cadence of a drill unit calling out steps. Left, right, left. On the morning of June 5th, he had texted her, "Briefing is going to run late, don't wait up." And she had replied, "Okay." And then she took a cab to the airport. David gripped his phone, his palms sweating. Suddenly, a realization hit him like a freight train. What is she doing in Sydney? The NAATI certification. She had talked about it before the wedding. The Australian work and holiday visa she had secured years ago but never used. Back then he had asked, "Why do you want to go there?" And she had dropped the subject forever. Now she was using it. He unlocked his personal laptop, went to his Gmail account, and typed in the search bar, Emma Smith. Nothing. She never emailed him there. Then he remembered. She knew the password. DW031689. He had told her once, and he never changed it. He frantically clicked open his Google account security settings and pulled up the recent security activity and login history. June 3, 1:42 p.m. IP address Virginia. ISP Verizon Fios Home Network. June 3, 2:08 p.m. IP address Virginia. ISP Verizon Fios. 2 logins on the afternoon of June 3rd spaced 26 minutes apart. During the exact window, he wasn't home. A cold sweat broke out across David's back. He didn't need to guess what she saw. The entire email thread with Eleanor Morgan was in there. The resort bookings, the flight coordination. She had read everything. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't suspicion. She read it with her own eyes. And after reading it, she didn't throw a fit. She didn't cry. She didn't call him screaming. She drained her savings, severed his access to the bank accounts, found a lawyer, bought a ticket to Sydney, and vanished. And she did all of it within 48 hours between June 3rd and June 5th. During those 48 hours, she was still replying to his texts with yeah and okay. David stood up so violently, his office chair rolled half a meter back. The screech of the wheels shattered the silence of his office. He walked to the window and leaned heavily on the sill, gripping it until his knuckles turned white. June 23. A process server arrived at the Pentagon. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner Emma Smith. Respondent David Walker. Colonel Miller summoned him to his office again. The colonel's face was dark maroon with fury. Walker. I just read the petition that was served to base security. He tossed a thick stack of papers onto the desk. David picked them up. Attorney for petitioner Michael Evans. Grounds, adultery, and irreconcilable differences. Exhibits flight manifest proving co-travel with civilian Eleanor Morgan. Resort receipts. Extensive email correspondence. Demands. Absolute divorce waiver of equitable distribution. David flipped through the pages until his finger stopped on the exhibit list. 14 printed screenshots. Those 26 minutes. Miller spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. An officer with a SCI clearance has a wife who flees to a foreign country, initiates a scorched earth divorce, and attaches hard evidence of your unauthorized, unapproved foreign travel to the Maldives. DCSA counterintelligence has already opened an inquiry into your security file. Do you have any idea what this means? David couldn't look up. By the end of the year, your name will be scrubbed from the promotion list, Miller sneered. And while this investigation is active, you are grounded. How are you going to fix this? I won't sign the papers. I'll contest it. And make it worse, Miller barked. A messy public trial with media leaks. It will end your career, and the security violation will send you to a court-martial. Settle this quietly. June 24. David sat on the sofa in his dark living room. His laptop was open. On the screen was the Emirates website searching flights to Sydney. But he wasn't booking a ticket. He couldn't fly. Overseas travel for an officer under active DCSA investigation was impossible. His passport was flagged. He was trapped. Did she know it would play out exactly like this? He grabbed his phone, opened WhatsApp, and hit the voice call button for Emma. 15 seconds of ringing. Call declined. He typed, I got the papers. If you want a divorce, come back to DC. And tell it to my face. A minute later, a 2-word reply appeared, not returning. David, what do you want? The court is going to mandate a separation period. This will drag out for months. Emma, I know. And your chain of command knows it too. The longer the process, the more the security clearance investigators will dig. She knew. She knew the military system inside and out. She knew a loud, prolonged divorce was a death sentence for his career. She didn't need to win the case immediately. She just needed the case to hang over his head like the sword of Damocles. David set his phone down on the coffee table. The table was completely bare. Even the white porcelain bowl had been put away in the cupboards weeks ago. He leaned his head back against the sofa and stared at the ceiling light. He used to not care who bought the bulbs or what color temperature they were. Now he sat under that glaring light every single night. June 28. Sydney. Emma received an email from the ANAO. An official offer for the contract translator role. 1-2-month contract. Rate $480 AUD per day. Sydney, CBD office. The background check had cleared. She clicked accept. Then she emailed her lawyer. Mr. Evans, I have accepted a position at the Australian National Audit Office. I will be translating international audit materials. This detail might be useful to you. Evans' reply was instantaneous, brilliant. Once DCSA counter-intel realizes a senior officer's estranged wife is working for a foreign government agency, even an allied one, they'll put a gun to his head to sign those papers immediately to contain the fallout. Emma understood. Outside the window of her cramped sublet, rain was falling. Next week, she was moving into a proper apartment in Newtown, just a 7-minute walk to the train station. She opened her notes app and typed, Negotiation, Plan 1. No reconciliation. 2. Do not return to the U.S. 3. Demand immediate signature. July. 3. Video mediation. On the screen was a sleek conference room. David sat next to a JAG-appointed attorney. On the other side of the screen was a room in Sydney. Emma sat at a desk against a blank white wall. Her lawyer, Michael Evans, was dialed in from his DC office. David's lawyer started Emma. My client is prepared to offer a substantial lump sum alimony payment if you agree to withdraw the petition or at the very least seal the proceedings. My client has one demand, Evans cut in smoothly. Absolute divorce. If your client agrees, we sign a settlement waiving all claims to his pension and assets. David's eyes never left the screen. He stared at Emma. She had lost weight. Her cheekbones were sharper, her hair cut slightly shorter. She was wearing a dark gray turtleneck sweater. Emma. David spoke up. His voice was lower than usual. Can we speak privately? There is nothing you need to say that can't be said on the record, she replied evenly. David's jaw muscles flexed. I admit I lied. But there was nothing physical between Eleanor and me. In the Maldives, From June 2nd to June 7th, Emma interrupted. The transfer was for 2 adjacent villas. They share a connecting door. I saw the confirmation from the travel agency. Silence fell over the D. C. Conference room. David's index finger twitched as if fighting to maintain his composure. I can explain everything. You don't need to explain. Her voice was crystal clear. The window for your explanations closed on June 1st when you stood in our bedroom doorway and lied to my face about an emergency briefing. That was your one and only chance. My demand is simple. Sign the divorce papers. Otherwise, this drags out and your SCI clearance suffers even more. David stared at the monitor. I won't sign. Yes, I made a mistake, but this can be fixed. Your Gmail password was DW031689. In the span of 26 minutes, I read your entire correspondence. Emma cut him off coldly. What you call a mistake, I read from start to finish. We're done here. We'll wait for the court's ruling. The screen went black. Emma leaned back in her chair in Sydney. Her fingers were trembling slightly. Her lawyer's voice came through the audio channel. He'll sign. It's just a matter of time. Emma opened her ANAO work portal. Her first project, translating an audit report regarding shadow supply chains used by an Australian logistics firm, July 15. Emma had translated 47 pages of the audit report. It detailed a massive international procurement of equipment that bypassed sanctions via shell companies in the UAE. In the appendix, the target Russian intermediary company receiving the final payouts was listed Global Trans LLC, Director Eleanor Morgan. Emma stared at the screen. Global Trans LLC was registered last September, the 4th month of her marriage to David. She opened the database and dug deeper. The auditors had yellow-flagged the contracts. The middleman markup was 37% above market value. The money ultimately originated from DoD subcontractors. Specifically, DoD procurement contracts routed through David's logistics division at the Pentagon. Everything clicked into place. Eleanor wasn't just a childhood friend. She was a business partner. She was securing lucrative defense subcontracts at inflated prices through his department and funneling the money offshore. Emma picked up her phone and texted her lawyer. Michael, I have new information. It concerns the respondent's involvement in a corruption scheme. 3 minutes later, Evans called her. Are you absolutely sure? I am translating the official audit. The data was obtained legally. Morgan's company is a shell entity siphoning money out of DoD procurements. Emma, the lawyer's voice turned gravely serious. This isn't a messy divorce anymore. This is federal corruption. The DoD, Inspector General, and NCIS will open a criminal probe. Gather every piece of evidence, the emails where they discuss projects, the Maldives flights, and the corporate registry for Global Trans. I will draft a whistleblower submission to the DoD IG. This will end his career and likely put him in Leavenworth. Give me 3 days. July 18. Evans sent the draft of the whistleblower complaint. The email screenshots, the plane tickets, the Global Trans financial data. Emma read it all and replied, file it. July 20. The complaint landed on the desk of the Department of Defense Inspector General. July 22. The Pentagon. David was relieved of command. The order came down at 10:00 a.m. Pending a criminal investigation by the DoD Inspector General, and NCIS Lieutenant Colonel Walker is suspended from all duties. Security clearance suspended. Travel restricted. David stood by his office window. The parade grounds were empty. He pulled out his phone and texted Emma on WhatsApp. Did you file the IG complaint? Reply, yes. His hand gripped the phone tight enough to crack the case. Do you understand what this means? They're going to put me in federal prison. Emma, I understand. David began typing furiously. I gave you a home. I gave you $1,500 every month to live comfortably. The apartment was in my name, but you lived there. You drove the car whenever you wanted, and you want to destroy my life over one vacation, the reply came 10 seconds later. It was shorter. You gave me $1,500 a month to pay the utility bills and buy groceries. The markup on the Global Trans contracts was millions. You paid my living expenses. You wired her massive sums through a federal corruption scheme. We have nothing left to talk about. David stared at the words. She had figured it all out. He hadn't taken direct kickbacks from the contract, but there was an email from Eleanor, once it's signed, I owe you big. NCIS would interpret that unequivocally. July 28. David was summoned for interrogation by NCIS and federal prosecutors. Charges pending conspiracy to defraud the United States and abuse of public trust. He returned to the apartment and collapsed onto the sofa. The place was a wreck. He hadn't cleaned in weeks. The daylight LED bulbs overhead still burned bright, but the light felt sterile like a morgue. The fridge was empty. Her sticky notes still clung to the plastic shelves. There hadn't been a single living sound in this house for 53 days. July 29. David called Emma's lawyer. Mr. Evans, I will sign the divorce papers and the settlement agreement immediately. Excellent. I will file them with the court. We can expedite the decree. And one more thing. David's voice cracked. Tell her to stop cooperating with the investigators. Stop leaking documents. I will let the process play out as it must, Evans replied coolly. I'll pass along your message. July 29, Sydney. Emma received a text from her lawyer. He signed. He's begging you not to make any more noise. Emma sat in her small Newtown apartment. The glass of water on her desk had gone warm. With her left hand, she rubbed her ring finger where a faint tan line from her wedding band still lingered. The ring itself had been sitting at the bottom of her suitcase for weeks. She texted back, understood, and turned off the lamp. October 12. The final decree arrived. The marriage was officially dissolved. That same week, federal prosecutors formally indicted David Walker in federal court. November 6, Sydney. 4:00 p.m. local time, 12:00 a.m. EST. One final video call requested by David's defense attorney. Emma sat at her desk. David appeared on the screen. He wasn't in their old Arlington apartment. He was in a barren room with bare walls. His assets had been frozen. He was wearing a plain gray hoodie looking gaunt. His cheekbones protruded, his eyes sunken. 7 seconds of silence. Emma. She looked at the screen. I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm sorry. She said nothing. I only just realized, his voice trembled. I took everything for granted. For 11 months, you cooked, you cleaned, you remembered my pills, you changed the light bulbs, you wrote the labels. When you left, I realized none of that happened by magic. You did all of it. He paused, wringing his hands. I thought it was just your duty as a wife. Emma waited a beat, making absolutely sure he was finished before speaking. What you just said is not an apology, you are simply describing what you lost. It became inconvenient for you to live without me, and you are complaining about that discomfort. You used the past tense, I thought it was my right. You didn't think it was a mistake back then. You only changed your mind because the consequences finally caught up to you and ruined you. David's jaw clamped shut. I don't need your apologies, David. Me leaving and me submitting that file to the Inspector General wasn't done to force you to say, I'm sorry. Then what was it for? He asked hollowly. For myself. It has absolutely nothing to do with you anymore. She reached for the mouse. This is our last conversation. She clicked end call. The screen went dark. Emma stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water and drank it. It was cold and refreshing. December 19. Emma walked out of the arrivals hall at Sydney International Airport. She had just returned from a work trip to Melbourne. The directors at the ANAO were thrilled with her work and had just offered to extend her contract indefinitely. The hot summer Sydney wind hit her face. The sun was at its zenith. The sky was a brilliant, translucent blue. She stopped by the curb to wait for her Uber. The wheels of her beat-up 2 8-inch silver Samsonite squeaked slightly. She slipped her right hand into her jacket pocket. Her fingers brushed against a small, cold metal circle. Her wedding ring. It had traveled with her from Washington, D.C. to Sydney, then to Melbourne. She hadn't thrown it away earlier, not out of sentimentality, but because she simply hadn't found the right moment. Now, the moment was perfect. She pulled the ring out and looked at it. Engraved on the inside was the date of their wedding. She turned toward a thick patch of green shrubbery lining the airport road. With a casual flick of her wrist, she tossed the ring. The metal flashed in the bright Australian sun, traced a short arc, and vanished soundlessly into the dense foliage. She didn't even watch where it landed. Her Uber pulled up. She grabbed her suitcase, opened the door, and slid into the back seat. CBD, please. The car pulled away. Sunlight poured through the window, resting warmly on her hands, which lay gently in her lap. On her left ring finger, there was no trace left whatsoever. It was completely, flawlessly bare.